Good evening and welcome to the Healthy Debate. My name is Lindy Nocturne. Our aim with this programme, produced by Health Freedom Ireland in conjunction with the Irish Inquiry, is to promote debate on issues relating to health in Ireland. We would like to make it quite clear that we have no agenda beyond seeking to present all sides of the argument so that you, the public, can make up your own mind about issues relating to your health. Much of the material you will see on this programme is not available through mainstream channels. So if you wish to support us and to spread the word, please press the share button on your screens now. We'll start with a couple of good news stories. For a start, many more shops are seeing the light on the subject of masks. Step Forward Aldi in Claremorris, County Mayo. A large sign at their entrance says, and I quote, "To protect our team and our customers, please wear a face covering in store. Please also be mindful of those who cannot wear a face covering for medical and religious reasons. Thank you." Thank you, Aldi. We appreciate it. With the government unwilling to admit that lockdowns make no difference to the spread of the virus and seemingly determined to keep us all on level 5 until heaven knows when, a significant pushback has begun. A third of the population is ignoring the 5K rule. That's particularly true in rural areas where the closest supermarket can be 5K away, 11K away, 15K away. It's interesting to note that according to the Oxford COVID-19 Government Response Tracker, look it up, it actually exists, Ireland has had the most stringent lockdown of any country in Europe. That's 163 days of workplaces closed and counting, as we know. Italy trails behind us in second place with 131 days, followed by the Netherlands with 110 days and the UK with 104 days. Right at the bottom of the list is Sweden, with no workplaces closed at all and no difference in the rate of infection in the past year from the virus. People are also beginning to resist taking on an untested vaccine, at least without a prior test to see whether they are already immune to SARS-CoV-2. It's well known that giving someone who is already immune to a virus, giving them a vaccine, can cause the body's natural immune system to go haywire, basically. Of course, people are also becoming more aware that vaccination may not be necessary at all. If doctors were allowed to prescribe vitamin D, ivermectin, and hydroxychloroquine, have I got it right? After the initial diagnosis of a viral illness. The less good news is the only way you can get hold of ivermectin at the moment is if you boo, neigh, or bah. In other words, if you're an animal. Although weirdly, I've discovered, it was being used in the past to treat head lice in children. Who knew? So anyway, take your vitamin D. Further good news is that the rapid antigen test that is considerably less invasive than the discredited PCR technique is becoming more widely available. Such tests are cheap and you get a result in 15 minutes. So if you're called to a test, request a rapid antigen test. If more people start asking, maybe they'll make them more available, and it would be to all our benefits. Right, on to tonight's debate. Tonight, our debate is on the subject of young people with special needs and their carers, all of whom have had a particularly tough time of it in the past year. In the studio with us here, we have Sinead Tighe, whose son Daniel was born with a severe form of Sotos syndrome. Got that right? Yeah. A rare genetic disorder. Daniel is severely intellectually disabled, epileptic, incontinent, and has poor sight. He's also prone to very challenging behaviour. We will also chat to Colette, who has a special needs daughter called Sarah, Dana and her daughter Veronica, whose son and brother was reprimanded for not wearing a mask in a shop. They're on the autistic spectrum. And Rachel, who has a high-functioning autistic daughter. So we'll start with you, Sinead, and could you tell us what your last year has been like?
It probably has been one of the hardest years that I've done. Don't get me wrong, the years previous to this have been very, very hard and quite similar to lockdown, but this has been particularly even worse. And I think it was because we're never recognised as a group. We're last to be thought of. We're forced to have cuts.
You mean carers?
Yeah, carers and those with disabilities. We're not thought about as a vulnerable group, and we're not being given the same recognition as other groups out there. It started off initially at the start when things were very bad and they were saying to us how serious it was. We were a group that wasn't offered any PPE, we weren't offered any masks, we weren't offered anything. We all had to fight and call and ring, and we had to keep chasing. It was only the likes of if you knew groups or you were part of Family Carers Ireland that they supported us that time with all PPE at that stage. And that was the early stage of COVID when it all first started, where you thought this was only going to be a few weeks.
Yeah.
But then you realise that we're going to go on for a lot longer, and now we're up to today and we don't know really, we're still living in that uncertain time. I think the hardest bit is being no services, no respite, no care. Then obviously school gone from us for the last couple of weeks has been quite hard, taking the children out of routine. But anyone that's belonged to any service and depends on them for their child's development is very, very hard. And children have regressed in that time. Some may haven't, but a lot have regressed in that time. To take children or young adults out of a routine that have disabilities or that have conditions like autism, is severe to them in life. It's severe to their development, their progression. It's severe to how much they more can develop in life. As being a carer then, as myself, it just put much more of a toll on myself. The whole workload of Daniel that I have to do on a 24-hour care basis with no help was just horrific. It didn't, I get lack of sleep. I had to do everything myself. My daughter's doing her leaving cert. She would be a help, but I had to park her and say, look, you have to look after your side of things now and I look after Dan. My husband works, so he's not around all the time. He is there as a support, but the main care is coming from myself. Around the country at the moment, we have 550,000 carers. And we're talking about family carers that look after their children, look after their mothers, their fathers, siblings. We've young carers as well at the age of 17 to 20. We've just 67,000 of them. So they're actually caring for their mothers, their fathers, or helping out at home. We're saving the state over €20 billion a year in what we do, but we're not being recognised for it and never been recognised for it. The children aren't recognised as a group, that they have rights. As parents, for any of the children that have autism or disabilities or whatever needs that they have, we have to be advocates. Apart from the work that we have to do on a daily basis with them and teaching them in the last while, we have to be their main advocate and their voice. So that's a huge role on us as well, when definitely are not being heard. The issues that we're feeling at the moment is, one, is getting the kids back to school. There has been some light in the last while where kids were going back and, on a 50% capacity. We've now got news today that those in special schools will go back on 100% capacity from next Monday. We have first, second, junior infants and senior infants in junior school that they'll go back, but nothing for the 4th, 5th and 6th. So there is kids with special needs in 4th, 5th and 6th mainstream schools that are not going back next week. They've been given the roadmap of the 15th, which I can't understand why all kids with special needs couldn't have been brought back at the same time, which they need this, and their parents and families need this. The other issue that we feel as family carers as well is, where are we on the list of vaccinations? Now, as family carers, we feel that we have no other option to be vaccinated, because the way we feel as a person is, if anything happened to me. Now, that's if anything happened to me in sickness anyway, but if anything happened to me, who would care for Dan? There isn't, where would he go? He wouldn't go to an A&E, they're full. Hospitals are full capacity, no respite, no care services. There's nowhere that Daniel could go to. So who would look after Dan? So we were just urging the government to kind of put us on the list not to treat us in the general kind of form of adults, to put us on the list and have us vaccinated, and the most vulnerable children as well, which are not given any thought of either, that need to be put on the list. Now, I do know, and I agree, it's everyone's choice whether they want to be vaccinated, and that's everyone's choice. But there is a high percentage of us that really want it. And we really want this push, and family carers have been pushing this and bringing it up on the agenda, and different government people have been bringing it up on the agenda, but we're falling on deaf ears. We're not being thought of as any group. And we, as I say to you, we are saving the state a lot of money by what we do. And we're not doing it because it is out of love that we do it. Complete love that every parent that has a child with any issue, we do our job. We want them. I want them to have the best quality of life. And that means, doing our best for them. So it's so important that we are fit and able to do that too.
Just over the last year, all the schools were closed from March to September, basically, weren't they?
Yeah.
So you had Dan at home.
Yeah.
And, just in case, I know Dan.
Yeah.
So I'm aware of the situation. You had Dan at home all the time.
Yeah.
And this was the case for all, like the school he goes to. Remind me of how long he goes to school at what time?
He's collected on the bus at 8:00.
And there's no buses, of course.
Yeah, so he goes to school in St. Joseph's for the visually impaired in Drumcondra, and he comes home on the bus around 4:45. So it's a long old journey, but it's part of his life. He loves it. So he goes 5 days a week. So it's important for him to be there. It's important for me. That is my only respite. I realise now I never gave it so much thought before when he went to school. I didn't give those hours and realise how important they are. But by God, now I know when he goes back how important they are for me to rest and take care of myself, that I didn't do previously. So all of that time with him home and having to homeschool him was so hard. So you got support from school, but it was very hard to, Daniel's going, what's Mammy doing? We don't do this at home. So he knows when he goes to school, he does this. Mammy doesn't do these things at home, so what's she doing? So it was very hard to set that routine in as much as you could. We were lucky because it was summer and we had a lovely summer, so you could get out, and we were lucky in that respect. But then once June went, that was school finished. So then you had July and August, you were on your own, and you usually get July provision. We were lucky to get a few days of it, but not everyone was offered that. And then it's very hard then if you're taking it on yourself, trying to look for an SNA then to come to your home. That was hard because, again, it was COVID and you were asking someone to come into your home. So there was lots of issues that were posed around it and the concern that people had of it. And it's very hard to try and get that. So then they went back in September, so we were very lucky then we had September to December again. But we quite knew then, once it came to January, what was going to happen. But look, we're getting them back now, but I do think they all should be back. I don't think all the kids in mainstream that have special needs should be back. They shouldn't be staggering. They so need it. How can you explain to a child? And if there's a special needs child in a house and he has a brother or sister, or she has a brother or sister that's going back to school, and he or she sees them going back to school, what's that going to cause in the home? Why am I going back? How can parents explain that you're not going back for 2 weeks? Some of them won't have the understanding of that. So it's going to be very hard.
Right, we'll bring in our other guests tonight. Colette, tell us about your daughter and what's the story there. Sarah.
Hi, Sarah is 24 and she's special needs, but she attends.
Who's muted?
Oh, sorry. Is it?
Colette,
sorry.
you're muted.
No, can you hear me
Colette?
now? Yeah, I can hear you.
Can you unmute? Is that it? Can we?
I did.
You have you, I think. Have we? Have we got you?
I don't know. Can you hear me, Lindsay?
Yes, now we can hear you. Now tell us your story. Now that you're unmuted.
How are you, Lindsay? My daughter Sarah is 24, and Sarah would attend a rehab centre in Clonmel here and in Tipperary, and it was my decision to take Sarah from the centre initially when I heard about COVID last year. So just as safety, because we were, nobody knew what was going to happen around COVID. I had been watching it with a guy an Irish guy that was living in Wuhan at the time, Ben Kavanagh. So I had been following it on YouTube through there. So when it started coming through Europe and came to Ireland, I decided then myself I wouldn't take the chance, and I took her out of the and had her at home. She did have outreach support for a while, but then when COVID numbers would pick up, I thought maybe for best I just kind of put a hold on it again for a little while. But I can see now the problem that's happening with Sarah, her insecurities, her isolation from being away from her friends, being away from society, her grandparents. It has affected her, to an extent that, I can see a difference in her well-being.
So what happens, because when I was growing up, our next door neighbours, I remember one of the daughters was, she went to a special school, and what really struck me was that once these children grow up, where do they go? Because I remember her name was Catherine, by the way, and we had to visit her. And I remember going to see her when I was quite young in a room with very old people, and I was just thinking it must be a huge problem for the parents of people who have of children with special needs as they get a bit older.
Yeah. Well, I suppose I'm lucky here that there is a good support group for Sarah, that she was lucky enough after her primary school that, they were able to have something set up for her after she left school. It is great to have that. It's just, you can see how much it really means, and when it all defaults like it is now with the COVID and the support group there's a lack of attendance and stuff like that, you can see what it would have meant, what it does mean to the likes of Sarah and other people that attended, other users that attend sources like the rehab.
So what's happening exactly at the moment in Clonmel?
I do know that it's the rehab centre, I think, for people with special needs is available, but they're bringing them in on there's only a certain amount of people being brought in for maybe 4 hours, and then they turn it around and someone else is brought in again. There's limited time for the users in there. Again, I do think that I probably overreacted with panic because of COVID and took Sarah out there. But with what's happening to her now, it's definitely opened my eyes to get her back in and get her socialising as soon as possible. It's playing havoc with her mental health.
Does she do any work or anything? Does she have a job?
No, Sarah, no, she would have to be, no, Sarah, her intellectual wouldn't be great. She doesn't read or write or anything like that. But her interaction with others is very important to her. Sarah's the type of person that just watches the world go by, but as long as she's involved in it, that means everything to her.
Yeah. It must be very confusing for her then.
It's very confusing. At the moment, it's just, we thought it started off to be something exciting at the start. And when I say that, I don't mean this in a bad way. I mean, like, Dad was home from work, Mum was around, last March when this all started. And here we go nearly a year later, and the progress has been, nothing. Everything has got worse. The isolation, not being able to see grandparents, see, her cousins and stuff like that, where she would have had that before the interaction. It's all and friends call into the house. It's all it's really after damaging, and I can see it now. It's playing havoc, and it's not right. It's not right. Something.
She's an only child, I take it, is she?
No, I have a 16-year-old son
right.
as well. Yeah.
So there's somebody.
I do.
Somebody there.
I have a 16-year-old, Scott, and he's very good. He's very good with Sarah, and only for that, Lindsay, I would be completely lost. The fact that Scott is so good with his sister, and Scott has a girlfriend, and she comes up and she plays games with Sarah, and that's the interaction that Sarah gets.
Oh, that's brilliant. Right, we'll move on to Dana and her daughter Veronica, who they've had a problem with the whole issue of masking in particular. But maybe you'd outline what your story is briefly for everyone first.
Okay. I have an 18-year-old boy who's named Eric. He is currently in his last year at St. Patrick's Special School in Enniscorthy. Also, because it's his last year, we would generally be working with them, transitioning to adult services, which has kind of been put on hold. Everything's being done in a manner kind of just by emails and such. Normally you'd be able to go and try services and interview people and see if you felt it was the right fit for you. And we are running out of time because we are going to be approaching the end of the school year here soon enough. My son Eric was diagnosed on the autism spectrum at the age of 2.5, which is an early diagnosis because it was evident quite early in his life that something wasn't developing correctly. He is verbal in that he can speak, but he can't hold a conversation. You wouldn't be able to get an opinion out of him. He'll give you one-word answers to things, and sometimes he'll even answer a yes to something that you know isn't a yes. And I also have my daughter Veronica, who's with me right now. She's 16. She's also on the spectrum. Veronica, though she attends a mainstream school without the use of a special needs assistant, Veronica does have some pretty big sensory issues. And because of that, she actually does have a mask exemption in her school. And Veronica is capable of functioning within society, and she understands safety and everything. Veronica can have full conversations with people. And then I also have a 8-year-old little girl who we're in the process actually of having her diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, because we're certain that's what's happening, and the school is actually preparing reports and helping us with that too. So now that's also on hold. Everything as far as how everything's affected our family, a lot of it is, especially Eric, he's quite dysregulated, not being in school. Like the other Sinead mentioned earlier that they have started back in the special schools on a reduced capacity, and that was helpful for him. But just like she had said, my son did not understand the idea of mom trying to homeschool him, and I've dealt with homeschooling off and on through a number of years in different countries too, and because of the constraints of the COVID restrictions, as a parent, you're actually quite restricted to how you would normally homeschool. Normally, you'd be out in the community, and there'd be a lot of hands-on things, and you'd be able to meet up with other groups and that. And that currently isn't, that's not happening. So you're not even able, as a parent, to homeschool in a way that would work for your family. And Veronica and Eric have been discriminated against in a local corner store here for not having masks, and told if they didn't have masks, they wouldn't be served, even though Veronica was trying to explain that they do have a diagnosed disability. I could actually let Veronica tell that story if you're ready for it.
Yes, Veronica, will you tell and approach the mic a little bit more so we can hear you? Tell us your story, Veronica.
All right. So it was the evening.
About 8 p.m.
About 8 p.m., yeah. And we were going to our local corner store because I just wanted some junk food, honestly. And we thought there would be no problem. Eric heard that I was going, and he said that he wanted to come with. He basically just said corner store, and I was like, okay, there should be no problem. It's the evening. We should be able to just go in and go out. Usually we wouldn't do anything like that, but we thought it was going to be no hassle. We walk in, and literally as we're about to, we had our things in our hands. We're about to put them on the till, and then some lady, she says, "Excuse me, can you put on masks? I explained that we can't, that we are exempt under the current legislation, and I think I said that it was due to disability. That was it. Clear. Should have been the end of it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. She had to say, well, do you have a doctor's note? According to the current legislation, which I've read, there's nothing about needing a doctor's note to say that you do not need to wear a mask in a store, just saying you're exempt under, due to disability under Section 4, I think, Section 5, excuse me, under Section 5. That is enough for them to just serve you. And
can I just, Veronica, can I just ask you, was this the woman behind the counter, or was it just another person in the shop?
It was the woman behind the counter.
Okay. Grant.
Sorry, I should have said that. I guess this lady was too bad. But yeah, she said that we had to have a doctor's note, and that there was a new thing in the law that I apparently didn't read, that I had to have a doctor's note. And she then said we could buy masks from the store. The store sold masks, and we basically said that would be pointless. We can't even put them on. We can't wear them. So then, after I basically summarized about a minute of back and forth,
Right.
going in circles, and this lady then decided to serve us. My brother at this point, he was like flapping his hands. He was clearly uncomfortable. Yeah, stimming, that's what it's called when he goes, and he was talking to himself. He clearly was agitated. But the lady then served us, and we bought our things and we left, and thankfully it didn't go worse than that, because it likely could have.
Yeah. Oh, Grant. Thank you, Veronica. Right.
And then she came home and told me what had happened, and I said, really? And I got her account of it, and then I actually phoned the corner store, and I wanted to have a conversation with them and explain that these children are indeed on the autism spectrum. They're not making it up. And the woman was like, oh, okay, I'm going to get the manager to contact you tomorrow. The manager wasn't there, so this was just a regular worker. And I said, okay, I expect to hear from the manager, left my contact details, and I did get a phone call the following day from the manager, who told me that because my children were older, that they absolutely have to, that she just was not educated properly on what the legislation was. We went in back and forth in absolute circles. It really was a very distressing phone call. For 25 minutes and 28 seconds, I actually recorded it in the event that I might need to refer back to it later. And yeah, it was basically, what she did finally agree that my son must have been on the autism spectrum, because he was showing signs of distress by jumping up and down and hand flapping. She did say that, well, when the children come in, it's not just that simple for us to just accept that they say that they can't wear a mask. So it got to the point where she agreed that they would review their CCTV cameras in the shop and find out who my kids were. Yeah, it was a very distressing call. It got to the point where I did thank her for actually calling me back, because I figured I would have to chase it up, and I didn't. So I appreciate that they did go and make that. They did go and make that effort to actually call me. But, telling Veronica, even after they explained that they had disabilities, my son showing, like doing something that was very obvious, that he wasn't quite what you would call typical in his behavior, and then telling them that the next time they come in, they must wear a mask or they won't be served. it just shows that the education for these managers and such is not what it should be. I think they're being put in a difficult position because they're being told that by their higher ups, their bosses, that they have to do this, and they're not being properly educated on the actual legislation. And she did say we're not autism experts. Which is fair enough. They don't have to be, but they do have to listen to the people that are coming in and trying to communicate.
Dana, we've a question. Dana, just hold on a sec. Sinead has a question for you here in the studio.
Dana, I not to say I've experienced. I would have some experience of that. I have a sister with autism, but also with having Daniel. He can't wear a mask either. What I did, and I think you would fully understand and know this, we do have to educate the public on what we call disabilities that aren't visible. And autism is always, it's very hard to pinpoint that. People can't see it. It's sad that they don't kind of understand and take, listen to your daughter or kind of really see it from your son. But I just got, I don't know whether it helped you, but I got kind of cards done up, and I put one around Daniel's neck, and I also got one for my sister, and they were blue, and it just says, I'm exempt for wearing a mask due to my disability. Now, I know we shouldn't have to do that, but it might help to educate people more that to look at and take before they question or put our children in those positions.
The thing is, from a certain perspective, it just kind of feels like they first started putting yellow stars on the Jews back in the Second World War II. So we're not really wanting to identify ourselves out there to absolutely everyone. That, like my daughter in particular, she really does not mind discussing her disability when she's okay to discuss it. She doesn't want to
random street.
Right? Yeah,
knowing I'm disabled.
Yeah, and because she is a teenager and such, I do leave it up to them. I
do agree with you saying, and I wouldn't be kind of talking about putting stickers on like the Jews, but what I would be saying is sometimes we have to educate those in the public to try and understand our children more and to understand them as people in society. It's not about labelling them at all, but in times of the way that we were being treated within COVID and this whole strict thing of masks that was making it quite difficult for people with disabilities or any medical issues, that sometimes people felt it was better so that they wouldn't be put in these positions. And it was just maybe something I was suggesting that might help. It wasn't saying, not one bit I was saying to label your children or Veronica to be labelled. No, I wouldn't say that to you at all. It's not something I like doing. So it was just maybe I think I was saying might help you out. That was all I was trying to say to you.
I'm aware that they are available. This was just it was very surprising when the incident happened, as she had gone in there unchallenged multiple times.
By myself though.
Yeah, and then when she was in there, basically in charge of her brother, who was more severe than her, she had to be able to defend herself and her older brother, who could have actually become aggressive and violent because his lack of understanding. Yeah, it's true. He could actually have a meltdown. And that was one thing that I did try to stress to the manager on the phone, who came back to me and said that there is a primary school across the road who, she goes, well, we do know a bit about autism because of the Rainbow Unit across the road at the school. And I was just like, yeah.
We've one more guest to bring in, who's Rachel, whose daughter is a high functioning in County Clare. Are you there, Rachel?
Hi, Lindy. How are you? Thanks for having me on.
So tell us your story.
Okay, well, my daughter is Charlotte, and Charlotte is 13, and she is very high functioning. As in, I think what I mean by that is she doesn't have an intellectual disability. So she's in mainstream school and always has been, and she has been getting on absolutely fantastically. She's made tons of progress over the years. But yes, since COVID has struck, her life has been turned upside down. And I don't think what a lot of people understand is the difficulty that masks pose to people with autism, not with actually wearing them, but living in a world where everyone else is wearing them. So, and I can't speak for every autistic child, but Charlotte has great trouble with eye contact. She doesn't like it. She says she sees too much of a person and it makes her very, very anxious and fearful. And now that everybody's wearing masks, that's all she sees. She's in secondary school. All the girls, all the teachers, they're all in masks. So she's very distressed by that continuously, even though she has an exemption herself. On top of that, she's really, really dependent on seeing people's faces for communication. She didn't speak until she was 5, so language is kind of her second language. English is her second language. Her first language would have been pictures, and she still kind of talks a little bit like a foreign person. So she's very dependent on facial expressions and everything, and now that's all been taken away from her. It's just gone through the roof, the level of anxiety she's had. In fact, I'm probably one of the few people who was almost grateful that the schools were closed, because going in there every day was such a chore for her. She just wasn't coping at all with the level of anxiety. She couldn't communicate with people. And I'm sure everybody knows when you're in first year in a new school and you're trying to make a good impression, and she was having panic attacks, and her mental health has taken a huge, huge nosedive. There's nowhere to go, and there's no services. Lots of typical people, lots of typical children, not all typical children, can almost afford to take a year out and possibly catch up. But this is a vital time in an autistic person's development, and they can't afford to take a year off from emotional development, social development, and that's effectively what's happened to her. And we're fearful as parents that her ability to be independent as an adult is seriously being damaged right now, and that's going to have detrimental consequences, not only for her, but other children on the spectrum. I see younger children, and I know that when Charlotte was 5 or 6, those were her most productive years in learning. It's when she learned to talk. It's when she really, really made the biggest leap that she ever made in her development. And I think of all those children at that age, it's such a vital time, and they're not getting services, they're not in school. I really feel that when masks were mandated in secondary schools, that people with communication issues, people with disabilities, they really, really weren't taken into account, because what the government were effectively doing when they made this mandate is excluding all of those people from society. It's almost like when she goes into a room, everybody has turned their back to her, that she can no longer communicate with them because they're all in masks. And I just would love the government to realise, to actually ask themselves, is what we're doing, is it effective enough? Is it really slowing down the virus enough? Or is it an overreaction that's going to cause huge damage?
It's a fairly drastic overreaction. But Sinead, and the on the Carers Association end of things, are there viewpoints on these kind of matters, such as?
I would agree with Rachel, was it?
Yes, that was
Rachel.
Rachel.
I agree with Rachel all about the communication and the way that it's when people with autism, and they like to, some like to look, some don't like to look, but to have kind of all of a sudden that taken away from you, the anxiety of that and how they can communicate, and sometimes they have certain ways that they like to see a person. Yeah, they like to see a person. It's very hard for them to communicate in life and to say, why do I have to wear a mask and what's that for? And to them, the importance to them is just to be out, what you're saying, socially. And I definitely say the effects on mental health of those children is very, very severe. And within autism, you don't have that support on the mental health side with them either. It's kind of a dual kind of working system, but it's very hard to get a kind of dual working system working when you have a child with autism or a teenager come with autism, and they do suffer with mental health. And I feel now lots of these children are going to have mental health issues, and there's going to be another service really needed for them to support them, to get them back where Rachel said she had her daughter, and to get her back on the right road to social development and be able to be independent in life on her own.
Rachel, you're still there. Your daughter, she's just gone into first year, has she?
She went into first year this year, which is possibly one of the biggest leaps that any
Exactly.
child can make going into first
Exactly.
year.
That's exactly
And
what
the
I'm
school
thinking.
yeah, I mean, the school have been incredibly kind. They really have, and they're doing their best, but their hands are tied by these legislations. And I just feel it's very, very it's disproportionate to the risk
Oh,
that actually exists to the majority of children. And we had come so far in Ireland. I mean, I know we still have a long road to go, but we had, cinema times for people with autism. There was shopping times for people with autism. There seemed to be an understanding about autism in the community. And I genuinely feel COVID has sent us back 10 or 15 years towards acceptance, because as Veronica was saying, when she was in the shop, she didn't want to have to say she has autism. She wants to be able to be accepted like everybody else for who she is without having to have a sign around her neck. And I think that's really, really important for people with autism, that they don't feel less, because unfortunately in society often does make them feel less than typical children. And we really, really need to look at that, because we just can't afford as a society, as a nation, to go back 10 or 15 years because we had made such progress.
are you homeschooling?
I am homeschooling her at the moment. It's going well, because, like I said, Charlotte didn't talk until she was 5,
Yeah.
and I took that on. I used to work in a bank. I left my job to stay at home and teach her how to speak as though she was a child from another country. So she's kind of used to me teaching her. It's not such a bad thing for her, but at the same time, I can't provide social skills with her peers. I can't provide that emotional development. Just even watching how other children behave, it just gives you that bit of independence in her life, and that really has been taken from her. And I worry she's regressed so much. She's not happy anymore, and she used to be so happy, and she's living in perpetual fear and anxiety. And that surely wasn't the goal of the government when they brought in these legislations. I really do feel that people with disabilities, they weren't given the thought that they needed to have been given when these legislations were being made.
So you do. Has there been progress? I don't know if any of you want to answer on this. I'll ask Sinead first. What kind of progress since Daniel was born? What kind of progress has been made in the treatment?
Well, I
of
agree.
special
I agree
children?
with Rachel. I agree. I know Daniel doesn't have autism, but he has sensory issues, and I know within disability and within autism, there's all different levels. So you can't speak for everyone. I think that's the way the government need to kind of understand. They kind of look at this umbrella of special needs, but they're not looking at there's different levels. There's kids more severe, so they have to look at us individually as children, individually as adults or adolescents. They're not looking at them as individual people, so, and looking at their needs. But yeah, there was the cinemas, you had swimming times, there was a huge progression in kind of working with kids outside in the community, and lots of services were starting to build kind of hubs in communities as well. And the whole idea is that you would say hairdressers taken on board, given times for children to get their hair cut when it was quite difficult to go into a barber's or a hairdresser's when it was busy. You would have, the shopping times, Lidl done that. Loads of the cinemas, as we said, that did. I found within the community for Daniel, as I say to our park run, that we got involved in getting that up and running how they accepted Daniel down there, and getting people with disabilities to be recognised and getting their own park run identity, that they weren't running under their mother's name. They all got their individual cards. So it was about identifying them as people as well. So there was huge progression in allowing, from Daniel's side of it, allowing Daniel to be run in the Dublin City Marathon, pushed by his parents, allowing Daniel to be at races that we were allowed. Now, some you can't, because it's safety issues. So you do look at them. So you kind of, you do have to think, will that suit Daniel? So Daniel doesn't look at cinema, but I definitely would advocate for cinemas to be more progressive in disabilities. But I know that's not for my son, but there's 60% of children out there possibly that would suit. Right. So you kind of have to think that way. It isn't just because it doesn't suit Dan that I don't believe it shouldn't be there for other people. I do believe that we were starting to be progressive in society. But yes, COVID has put everyone back, but definitely disabilities are all gone back with the lack of service, the lack of assessments, the lack of OT, physio, all these kids, the lack of speech therapy that's needed for those with autism. you know, with any child as well. And Rachel spoke about the early intervention years are the most important, and that's the worst part of the service that was lacking and is now worse. And if we don't start off early, they're not going to have, you know, it takes a lot for them to catch up and longer to get on in life. So we need all that, but all of that's gone. And yeah, the government didn't think initially about disabilities. You know, they didn't think of lots of things. They didn't think about nursing homes. They didn't think about lots of things. There was loads of issues, but definitely not about those with disabilities and the mask wearing, the rules around it, you know, how we were in our homes, any help we were on our own, you know, so they didn't think about any of us in that whatsoever.
And what I've realised, something that I was involved with down the years, which was Special Olympics, that's all gone too.
Yeah.
And that was a brilliant thing for, you know, because it was just great fun. And anyone who got involved, that was special needs kids that were having fun.
You know, but it was, and Lindy, it was good to see. At the micro meets the other day as well that they allowed to people with physical disabilities to run to see can they get their times for the for Olympics.
Oh yeah, Greta.
Yeah. So so that's good to see that it still showed me.
That's Paralympics.
Yeah. So I suppose still they were showing a glimmer of light to that being there. But you're right, the Special Olympics that within the whole area of Down syndrome Ireland, that's huge. That's all gone. Imagine how all those kids are suffering. And it is the social side of it as well. It isn't just about school and what Rachel said and what all the parents are saying. It's the social side that is huge to all of our children. It's huge for Daniel to be part of the community. It's huge for him to be out there. But that has gone from his life. And yeah, it was great, as I heard one of the other parents saying, yeah, it was lovely for Daniel at the very, very start to have Mammy and Daddy and Shauna all together. But then all of a sudden, he so wants us there all the time. He believes that we should be there all the time now. So now he's going to have separation anxiety from us. That's going to be huge in all the children as well, because they believe now everyone's at home. So now they have a routine of everyone being at home. And then when people start to go back to work, it's like retraining all these kids again back to routines that I'm sure every mother that's talking here tonight have got great routines, great consistency, great, you know, everything sorted out for their kids. And now they have to retrain and do all that again, especially when it's going back to society and their emotional needs.
Yeah, that's it. I was thinking the person who has the oldest special needs child would be Colette. Colette, have you seen changes with your daughter in the last, you know, when she was a little girl and now? How has the treatment of special needs children progressed in Ireland, and what effect will this have? Oh, she's muted. Colette, you're muted again. Ooh, Colette.
Sorry,
we got
can
you?
you hear me?
Yeah, we have you.
Sorry. I think things have changed, Lindsay, that there's more opportunities for special needs, but the waiting lists are a lot longer.
Really?
So much longer.
Like, what do you mean, waiting list for what?
Like for physio or for certain activities and stuff like that. There's absolutely, the waiting list is strong, especially when a special needs child moves into the adults section of, because, you know, they move on into the adult departments. They're treated just like anyone else. You go down, your name goes on the list, and you just wait till it's your turn.
Yeah. Veronica, are you there? Veronica, can we see you, Veronica? Veronica, what would you like to see happening now, since you're representing the younger generation here?
Oh, what would I like to see happening, huh? I would like people to basically stop being ignorant. This was all due to ignorance. They have to be educated on this stuff. This was my experience that I talked about was due to, well, a misunderstanding of the literal law.
Yeah. But what are you missing? What would you like to have back in your life now?
Oh, that kind of question. Yeah, swimming pools would be heckin' great. No, I just want everything just needs to be reopened, honestly. I really miss going out into the town by myself and
buying junk food, is it?
Not
Clothes,
just junk
you want clothes.
Yeah. I any shiny objects to grab my attention.
Oh, right, okay, fine.
And it's impacting not only the people, it's impacting businesses, and it's just, I don't like what I'm seeing, basically.
Tell them what you said about the moods of your classmates. That was so big.
When I actually was in actual school for a little bit, when they had it opened, everyone in school was in masks except for a few who wore face shields instead, right?
Like you.
Like me, yes. There were few kids who did that. But yeah, that's not the point. Point is, the teachers are actually having to get the kids to talk. Usually it's them having to get the kids to shut up. Everyone just seemed so down. Everyone just really did not seem anything.
Are you doing Zoom classes by any chance?
We're not using Zoom, but pretty much same concept, yeah. And
Teams or something.
May I just say I am learning nothing from them. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
As education-wise, these things are not working for me because, I have the attention span of a fly. And
is this true, Mother? Does your mother agree?
It's also part of the autism. She can be easily distracted. Yeah,
it is.
So
it's something I've struggled with.
So you're looking forward to getting back to proper school again. What year are you in? What year are you in?
I am not looking forward to proper school, but it's I don't know. Proper school didn't work for me either, but that's a whole other kettle of fish.
Yeah, it's a whole other story.
Right.
But I think she'd be happier if she was going back and not everybody had masks on their faces and was making
they're being restricted so much in school too. They can't, even when the school was open, their social interactions were very restricted, and we can't.
And all the constant sanitizing. Going clean.
Yeah.
Right.
But,
Grand. Well, we're starting to run out of time. Rachel, we've kind of not heard much from you. Have you any final words, Rachel, for us?
Well, it's funny, just something Veronica just said there, we struck a chord with me, the constant sanitizing and the masks in school and the girls social distance. Charlotte did say to me that when she's in school, one of the reasons she feels so afraid all the time is all these legislations, they're all telling her, you're in danger, be afraid.
Yeah.
When a child with autism, often they have excessive thoughts. That's really not a healthy thing for any child to have to think over and over, you're in danger. Because if you look at the statistics across the world, a healthy child hasn't died from COVID anywhere. And I think we just need to keep that in perspective, that, you're creating OCD down the road, you're creating mental health issues. And I really, really don't think it's necessary for children, because the risk to children doesn't seem to be as severe as we're being led to believe.
Thank you very much. Sinead, have you any final words for carers generally?
No, I just think, that none of us have been recognised, or our children have been recognised in this whole COVID thing. But I think it hasn't just been COVID, it has been previous to this. So if people just think it's just COVID that we as families or mothers are complaining or, talking about on social media, that it's only because of COVID we're all coming out. It's not. Yeah. We have been living these lives since the time our children have been born or diagnosed. So we've had to fight and advocate for our children. And like that, we've all had to give up jobs. We've had to kind of look at how we're going to teach these kids, give them more special time. The lack of services, most of us put more time into these kids than possibly services did. And we're the main advocates to work with the services. Sometimes we've had to link hospitals and GPs together because information isn't going across to one another. You're constantly working, and it is a job. And you don't want to think that, with your child, you want to be a mother as well, but it is a job aside from that, as well as making sure that these kids can walk the life that everyone else walks, and that's all you want. And you do want them to be treated the same. You do want them to have everything that everyone has within the extremes that each child can. Everyone is so different, and I am aware that, I know we all talk about masks, there is very seriously sick children out there that even can't go to schools. you know, that those families are very, very, you know, very secluded and very, very isolated. You know, I think I'm lucky that I can send Daniel back to school, and lots of kids are going back, but there is a cohort of family carers looking after children who will never go to school or who can't, who have immune deficiencies. So they have to be extra careful. So I do think my last word is really on vaccinations and getting them done for family carers, and obviously looking at those vulnerable children and really helping out those families as well, because they need life back as well. Those families need services back. They can't survive without them.
Grand. Do you know something that struck me? There's no male voices here at all today. And I know you all have husbands and so on that are, and I certainly know Keith certainly does his bit. So there you go.
Just one last bit. There is 40% of male carers.
Really?
Yeah, there's 40% of male carers. But yeah, it would be primarily be the women that do take on the role.
Yeah.
But sometimes men, I suppose in my life now, it'll switch for me and Daniel, you know, as Daniel gets bigger and older and stronger. I think it'll be a 50-50 role with me and Keith then. You know, it'll change.
It's just note, because a lot of what we're hearing about COVID from the various experts, they're all men. Yeah. And not that I've anything against men or anything, but right, so that's most of what we have to say today. Don't forget that the Healthy Debate is brought to you by a small band of volunteers. Thank you to our producers, Stephen and Sarah, who's here today again, to Danny and Peter, who have been working like Trojans along with Stephen to upgrade last week's programme. If you saw it, we had technical difficulties due to having to try and make it all better, to be honest. There's technology for you. So there will be another edition of last week's interviews with Ira Cummins and Dolores Cahill, if you want to see it. So we also have our two students, Ciara and Connor, who are keeping us all in order. And if you want to help us what we're doing financially, there is a donations page on the Irish Inquiry website, I think. If you would like us to talk on any particular topic, let us know. If there's any guest you feel we could do with having on this programme, please let us know. We're open to all ideas. We're not the mainstream media. We're open to all opinions and all ideas. Finally, you may be aware that on Saturday in Dublin, there's a peaceful march starting from Stephen's Green at 2 p.m. The theme is simple: open up the country. People are suffering. Enough is enough. So get out there and let us all join together in letting our leaders know what we think and what we want. Good night.